All right. So, welcome. This is what, week 8 or 9 of this. So we've moved our weekly chats to Thursday, being optimistic that as we gradually open up, people will have things to do on Friday to get ready for the weekend and the sports that they love to play. Again, I'm Ruth Nicholson. I work part-time for Team Genius as a coach and trainer. And the other part of my world is helping youth sports in terms of leadership and governance and operations and all that back-end stuff. With me, I have Gabe Skelly, who's our customer success manager here at Team Genius. And one of his things, every week he has a goal to talk to at least 50 different clubs in different sports in different countries to see what's going on and how he can help them. So this week, we had a bunch from baseball, softball, volleyball, rowing, and skating. And they come in kind of 3 different chunks. That's what I do, is I chunk up the questions, right? One of them is a follow-on from last week. One of the questions we talked about last week was, how are people keeping afloat in tough times? And had a question about fundraising. So we are incredibly pleased to welcome Teresa here with us, who's probably forgotten more about fundraising than I ever knew. To help us with that conversation. We have some return to play questions from different folks that I want to pose to the group so you can help each other out, and some liability questions as well. Those are kind of our 3 chunks. We're glad you're here. I can tell you that I probably do 2 to 6 online meetings and trainings a day now. Yeah, 2 to 6 a day. And this is one of them that I look forward to every week. It's really one of the highlights of my week because it's not a typical webinar and we're able to help you with your questions. So thank you for joining us today. So Gabe, what cool thing happened last week?
I would say some of the most fun things that I've been talking to, customers in different areas about are just getting ready to return to play. I know while a lot of people are still somewhat locked down and still trying to figure out what to do, there's some areas that are getting pretty close. I believe Florida is getting pretty close to returning to play, as normally as possible. Minnesota here, I think they just announced today that we're going into phase 2 of our reopening, which is a closer, reopening to what people are used to. Talked to a local hockey customer. Their ice is going to be opening up as long as it's formed right. About the end of the first week in June here. So they're pretty pumped to get out on the ice and start practicing with players. Talked a little bit about them about, what they're going to do for sanitizing and different things. And for them, it's up to the facility that they use to do that. So they're not too worried about that. Biggest change there was having to have the players come, dressed for hockey practice, but they're just super pumped to get out and be able to get on the ice. Talked to some other customers in Canada, and while things are still closed in a lot of areas, they're pretty excited that it's looking like they'll be able to have a regular end of summer or fall season. And just I guess the excitement around all these things, starting to look like we might be coming to the beginning of the end, where things starting to open up and some semblance of normalcy, or at least getting sports going. Maybe not normalcy where you'd expect with the same kind of crowds, but just getting people going and getting out there. A lot of positivity from organizations, a lot of positivity from the coaches involved getting back out there, and the kids are super pumped. I mean, I've heard from I don't know how many organizations that the kids are just ready to run on the field and go now. So I think all these parents that have been having their kids at home doing the distance learning are very excited to get their kids out on the fields and doing things so that they can get all that energy out. So I know I certainly am here in St. Louis Park. The Little League has said that I think we're gonna have a late season starting July 1st, which my 3 boys will probably be playing in. So I in my home life, I've been out running with my kids and doing wind sprints and things to get them ready for the season start. I can't preach it and not keep my kids ready for the seasons once they get going. So I think whatever we are returning to, I think it's coming soon, and hopefully it's gonna be that way for everybody, and we can do it in a healthy way. And just a lot of positive talk this week. So.
Cool. Would you introduce Teresa, and we'll jump into fundraising first off?
Yeah, so we've got Teresa. on the line here. And Teresa's been a professional fundraiser in lots of different nonprofit organizations for a long career. I think over 22 years in doing that. I know Teresa from work on one of the Minnesota AIDS Ride, the Red Ribbon Ride, and then also she's done just a lot of stuff with team and training and a lot of things with various cancers. And she's got a lot of experience in fundraising in a lot of different ways for different organizations. So we invited Teresa on today to just give us, tips and tricks and maybe some ideas for what's working or not working and ways to raise some money in these with everything going on right now.
Right. One of our baseball and softball colleagues had specifically asked about fundraising. So, Teresa, what are some considerations that people need to think about when they're trying to fundraise when our communities are really stressed economically?
Great question. Great question. And actually, and specifically too with, if you're not an organization that's not providing direct service to those impacted by what's going on right now, it's even more challenging. So I think, we need to get creative and think outside of the box from, our traditional fundraising. I know with a lot of sports groups and with my, daughter had been a competitive gymnast, you have these various fundraising activities that you do that you don't necessarily, you have some events, but you're either selling things. And so you have to really get creative and think outside the box for some of those things. And also with my work, we've had some fundraising events that have had to turn virtual. So, going online for virtual fundraisers is a unique and fun way that, none of us are used to doing. So it's thinking, what can we do to engage, some of our constituents? I think one opportunity with doing that also is you're able to reach a broader group of people. If you don't, you're currently fundraising in your community, or having an event, it's really limited to those people there. Versus if you're going online, you have the ability to promote through social media and your channels with your organization to reach a broader group of people. And we're seeing, organizations that are raising more money from people and supporters that aren't in their backyards. They're in another state or in another community, but are passionate about a cause. So, while my experience is primarily, cause-related fundraising with, cancers and HIV and AIDS, I've also, done some fundraising, with my daughter's sports teams, and grew up a little bit playing sports myself. So, but again, I think, social media is a huge opportunity for fundraising. If you've got your Facebook group or a page or, Instagram, I think content, having valuable and important content that's really relevant to your audience, and somehow, getting creative that way with, raising some money. I know of a group that's doing, they're a cancer-related organization, but they're having a promotion online with, I think it's flowers, and so they're and selling seeds. And so, for a small donation, grow some seeds, grow some flowers with some seeds that you can, kind of do on your own. So it's more kind of, still a virtual experience, but engaging your community to, raise some money. I think it's often been referred to as kind of the Obama model, where, you want to get smaller donations, but from more people, and that really adds up. So versus going after some of your bigger donors. But if you do have some donors that have been donating, I would invite you to, reach out to those people and just touch base. We're actually doing that with my organization, Rain Sarcoma. Sarcoma is a rare connective cancer tissue, rare cancer of the connective tissue. And we're reaching out to constituents, again, to just touch base with them. We're not necessarily asking them for money, but we're touching base and, giving them updates and answering any questions that they might have. And in fact, one example, I talked to a donor last week, and he's like, what's going on with Party in the Park this summer? I said, it's going virtual. And he's like, you know what? I haven't made a donation in a while. I should make a donation. And lo and behold, this morning when I logged in, there was a $500 donation that he had made. And so that was pretty remarkable. So again, it's just, having conversations with people and sharing that, you're continuing to do the work that you're doing, but that everyone is struggling at this time. But, and just don't be shy about asking. But it's really kind of also being sensitive to, we're all not in the same place to be able to give as well. So if you are able to do this, we would appreciate it. Questions?
Yeah. What questions do you have about fundraising? Why we can pick Teresa's brain for ideas. Anyone?
I had one about the different websites and things. Teresa, what do you find is the I guess most potent social media platform for people reaching out to friends and family and people to get donations in? Is there one that you're seeing where people are doing more or engaging more on, or?
I think, Facebook has certainly made lots of changes. For individuals, and you can encourage individuals for their birthday to raise money. There's also a donate button that you can incorporate into your website. So I would, encourage constituents to, raise money through Facebook. And they sometimes have promotions or partners that they partner with to be able to, waive some of those transaction fees or some of those processing fees. But I think Facebook is probably, probably the most popular at this time. What I have run into with Gofundme is, it's really, for lack of a better term, it's more of kind of the pain situations, the challenges that people have, with not being able to pay medical bills or those sorts of things. It's a little bit more challenging for, organizations to fundraise on GoFundMe. I know they've improved that and are consistently making changes there too. But again, I think Facebook is probably the best option at this point.
So we've got a couple questions that are coming through the chat. One of them is about GoFundMe. Is there a way you can set that up to get the most out of that if you've chosen to do a GoFundMe? They've set one up to support their officials and their referees, that piece of their organization.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So, and with GoFundMe, you have a unique URL link to your page. So you're going to want to promote the heck out of that for, drive traffic to that specific page. Because what I did run into a year ago, we had a challenge match for our patient starter notebook. And I had set it up for our organization, which we had a GoFundMe account, but it was tied to my name somehow. And so when you searched, you could either search for our organization name or my name, which I thought was really odd. And so I think they've fixed some of that, but again, it's, once you get that link, to be able to throw that out on your website and, every social platform that you can to promote that. And then again, sometimes I know they had a big promotion on Giving Tuesday, which I think was May 5th this year, where they had a company kind of matching donations that would come in on that particular day. But yeah, there's thousands and thousands of fundraisers on GoFundMe, but it's a great platform. They're definitely improving for organizations. It was more for individuals or families, raising money for medical bills and those sorts of things, but they've definitely made some improvements for organizations. So promote the heck out of it. And
the next question is sort of a companion thing to fundraising, a different way of raising money, which is sponsorships. And Kenneth is asking, do any of us have templates for asking businesses to become a sponsor for a sports club?
Yeah, so you can develop, somewhat of a sponsorship kit or a sponsorship deck. that would communicate, the cost of those sponsorships, some of the assets that you might be selling. For instance, if you've got those, the boards of the, the hockey rink, or the fences, or, wherever you're playing, or, banner placement. So to be able to outline those assets that you're able to sell for sponsorship. So it's, and then you also, as part of your sponsorship deck, you want to talk about who you're also attracting, or like your customers. It's the parents and families of those, athletes, those people participating, so that you can, because organizations, they want to be philanthropic, but they also, that ROI, that return on investment, is important for companies as well. So just outlining a good sponsorship deck with a little bit about your organization, highlighting what it is that you're selling and the different price points to support you, and then showing kind of some of that visibility of what you're going to be providing for that donation.
So when I help clubs with all the different kinds of revenue that can come in, we make a big point of making the difference between fundraising and donations and sponsorships. And the sponsorship component really is a business relationship, because you have something to offer those sponsors. So knowing who your members are, what they enjoy doing when they're not playing your sport, what their demographics are. Are they parents with, first graders, or are they families with high school age kids? And so when you're going to those businesses, you can say, we have these sorts of members, and they're these ages, and they love to fish, or they love to go for ice cream after games, or things. So when you know your membership, you can show that sponsor what's in it for them to be your, aligned with you in some sort of business relationship, where you can promote what they do and help them get business and get clients, as well as money to run your programs. So think of it as it's got to be a win-win to make that sponsorship work.
Right. And then be sure to send thank yous. Handwritten thank you notes are, really a nice touch.
Years ago, we founded a YMCA in our community, and every year they had their annual fundraising event, and the thank yous for donors at a certain level was they had the kids in the daycare, in the before and after school care for the YMCA, draw pictures of what they love to do at the YMCA, and they framed those pictures and the kids' version of thank you for each of the donors.
Nice.
So
nice personal touch. Yeah.
we have a picture written, drawn by a little girl, because she wanted a bigger, better swimming pool at the YMCA, which it took a few years, but she got it. Oh, well, let's move on to, we had some sort of popcorn return to play questions, and I want to invite people to, type in the chat or speak up with your voice, but things where we might be able to help each other out. So one of our skating colleagues has a high demand offering, and she's looking for ideas on reservation-based signups, because they've got to do social distancing. So imagine she's got skaters, she's got to keep them socially distanced. So she can only have so many spots in her program, but ideas on how to set up this reservation system and payments when she's got a capacity that she can't exceed. Ideas for her? She's not here, but she's going to get the recording, so. Anyone? Would you have people pay up front, or would you have them put down a deposit, or would you not have them pay until they're confirmed? How would you handle the payment thing when it's a little uncertain? Ideas for Amber?
Ruth, I can chime in a little bit.
Yeah.
one thought is, I guess if you're going with a reservation-based system where you have a limited number of spots, I would probably lean towards when they make that reservation, they have to pay for it. Because what ends up happening is if you don't get people to commit, they'll sign up and then there's no penalty or any issue involved whatsoever with not showing up. And then if, it's like a hotel room. Once that spot's gone, you can't recover it. So typically by there being a payment made, they're showing a level of commitment. Not that you couldn't, if they call you to cancel it, that you couldn't refund it. But it does make them, it tends to make people a little bit more committed in terms of actually showing up, and that there's some penalty if they don't, because they are taking a spot from someone that might want to take it and that was willing to pay. And then she's at a loss if suddenly 5 people don't show up and she didn't receive payment for it.
Yeah, I've had things that I would sign my kids up for, and you would pay up front, and the refund was contingent, or how much of a refund you got if you backed out was contingent on, was there a waiting list and was somebody there to take your spot. So you couldn't get a full refund if you dropped out and there was nobody willing to take your spot. So you would only get a partial refund. But if there was somebody there behind you who wanted that spot and you pulled out, it affected the refund policy. So
I think there's something to that too, is if you get, I guess in this age of trying to be more contactless, people like to, I see a lot of stuff that I'm prepaying for, right? But then there's the other side of it as an organization. If people are paying for you and you have to give a refund, then are you eating those fees, right? So if you're paying 3% with the money coming in on every, dollar that comes in, then if you have to give a refund, then are you just going to eat those refund fees if you're giving a full refund? Or another thing to think about when you're thinking about upfront payments that are, especially if they're coming in through credit cards and things.
Right. Merchant processing fees. Pay attention to what those really are. All right. Okay. Second return to play question. Okay. So this is from Claudia, and she's from the rowing community. She's wondering how to engage and re-engage the community when we've been so preoccupied and things are still not returning to normal, at least not anytime soon. How are you staying engaged with your communities during a time when we're not seeing each other at the rink, at the field, on the shore? How are you staying engaged? I know some of you are.
With all our teams, we were doing weekly Zoom meetings to communicate with them, giving them just things to talk about, character education, things that we were doing, college career readiness stuff, and then drills and things they can do at home, and then make it a contest. So we try to stay as close together with them as we could, at least once a week.
Right. James is from soccer in Texas. Other suggestions for Claudia? Keeping in touch when we don't know exactly when it's going to look as normal as we want. So do things like weekly or monthly newsletters, do those things, are people still doing those sort of things, or are we just emailed out? I know Team Genius, we do one monthly, but I wonder if on a club level, if that's too far apart because things are changing so quickly. Any other ideas? All right. Okay, we'll go to question 3. And Bob, you're on with us, aren't you? Bob asked about masks and if masks reduce risks. And we talked about masks a fair amount last Friday when Catherine was with us. But what are your thoughts on players actually wearing masks? A lot of the protocols we've seen come out have coaches wearing masks, have spectators wearing masks. But what about athletes? What do you think about the concept of athletes wearing masks? Bob, do you want to weigh in with some thoughts? I see your name. I know you're here.
Yeah, it's a real concern with me because I don't go out without a mask, and I know it's very contagious. And you don't know by measuring their temperature if they're infected. So there's a lot of that. I don't think I walk when I go out for a walk every day. I wear a mask. I know I can do it. I worked in the attic for hours, and it was 110, and I wore a mask. So I know it can be done. So, but it really bothers me that these kids are exposing themselves and they don't have masks on. Because I go to Costco or Home Depot, I see somebody without a mask, I go down a different aisle.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's what I got to say.
All right. So Rob added something in the chat. He says they're going to have players wear masks for low intensity drills and on the sidelines. But when they're engaged in more active soccer activities, masks will be optional at the player or parent's discretion. So it's going to depend more on the activity and discretion.
I'm going to be running something this summer, hopefully, and I'm going to have the parents sign a waiver that they can play with certain players without a mask. And if they don't have it, otherwise they gotta wear a mask.
All right. Well, you gave me the perfect transition, Bob. Thank you. Because one of the questions that sort of lived in return to play and sort of lived in liability was Jeff from the volleyball community wanted some keys to protecting his organization from lawsuits when they're running private lessons and small group clinics, which in part goes to liability waivers and what's in them. What suggestions does the group have for Jeff about protecting your organization when you're running small group clinics, private lessons, more one-on-one kinds of things? Are any of you doing that right now, or will be like in the next few weeks? I can say that we'll probably be able to do that question a little more justice. We have a gal who's joined us for the last couple of weeks. She couldn't be here today, but she's a sports attorney from Hawaii, and she's able to join us every other week. So I would love to save that question for Catherine, because I'm quite certain she'll have thoughts on that. Ken runs a volleyball club. What resources are available to purchase hand washing stations and hand sanitizer for large groups of people? Rob, I think you had some resources that you shared, was it last week or the week before, on hand washing stations and hand sanitizers?
Yeah. So we ordered hands-free, like you have in your kitchen or your bathroom, where you wave your hand under it and the sanitizer will come out. So we've ordered those from someplace on Amazon. I don't remember where. And then we bought hand sanitizer, which we'll use, I guess, through a funnel almost to kind of fill up those stations. And then we'll set up a table at our fields, and the kids will come up and they can sanitize before, during, or after practice. We're going to have them do it before for sure, and after. If they want to do it during, they're certainly welcome to do that. And we'll have, we're buying hand sanitizer in bulk from a local whiskey distillery. So that's our plan.
It is fun to watch different communities as some of the distilleries have gone into the hand sanitizer business. So Kenneth, I don't know where you are, but a distillery in your neighborhood may be able to help you out. I do like the idea of the dispensers that you don't have to pump. You don't have to touch the dispenser to get the hand sanitizer out. Oh, the local fire department may have access to hand sanitizers and PPE, or they might know at least where to go, where to look for it. All right. What impact? I'm gonna ask Rob because he's jumped in. If you've got to then purchase equipment, you've got the dispensers, you've got the hand sanitizer, you've got the table, they're out on the field. How is this impacting either your staff or your volunteers? Because that's a whole nother responsibility that wasn't on the to-do list.
Yeah, we have not started any of this yet. We're just in the planning stage because they have not begun our return to play yet. So we have all these great ideas in theory as to how it's all going to work. We'll see how it pans out in execution, but I think the plan was we would work with our team managers to maybe solicit parent volunteers who are willing to help out. We obviously don't want to force anybody to do anything, but we'd like to have a parent volunteer sort of as the kids are entering into the field to remind them to put the hand sanitizer on. We're also going to do the no contact temperature checks when they arrive. So we bought a bunch of the no contact thermometers, one for each team. So I think we'll have parents on a rotating schedule kind of handle that, maybe a different parent or a different couple of parents each practice to do that sort of stuff. And then that way the coach can just focus on everything that they need to do on the field.
Right. I was talking to somebody about, well, it was the Georgia video that I sent you. Oh, yeah. And so it's a video, it happens to be out of Georgia soccer. And there were examples of activities the coach could do with the players, and they were all spaced apart. And then it also had photos of the parents helping with social distancing and sort of extra help for the practice. And I was talking to somebody last week and they said, well, that's all fine and good, but if your phase 1 or phase 2 rules, depending on which rules you got to live with, say you only can gather in groups of say 10 or 12, do your parent volunteers start to count against that 10 or 12 number, and would that then decrease the number of players that could actually participate in that activity? So it was an interesting question about how do you count noses when your phases have a nose count and you can't have a larger group than whatever that rule is. So I'm still noodling on that one. Like, how far away can you be and not be counted in the 10-person group? Steven, did you have? I saw the light go on. No, not.
I had a question for everybody: is if there's going to be added fees and things that money you have to put out for, the PPEs and the sanitizer and stations. Is that something that you guys have thought about, fundraising around that specifically, asking for parents and players to, make donations that cover that stuff, so it's not an added, expense for the organization?
We have not talked about fundraising for that stuff yet, but it's going to factor into our ultimate communication with them regarding refunds and credits. We're going to kind of give people a heads up that, we would like to give you X, but we're actually going to give Y because we have all these additional expenses that we've now incurred that we need to pay for, and who knows how long this is going to go on. And, are we going to have to be providing sanitizer for 6 months or a year or whatever it's going to be? So we're going to factor into the explanation there, and hopefully people will be welcoming and appreciative of the fact that we're being proactive in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anybody else have, as far as expenses, revenue, does anybody else have revenue that's impacted by this, everything going on other than the, registration and things that parents and players are paying? Like, do you guys have, any like revenue that would come in from organizations that donate, pull tab revenue, or things that you guys would normally sell, like pizzas or food at concession stands that have been impacted? Any of those kind of things?
Yeah, we look in Texas, we're probably not going to be able to have any food vendors throughout the fall season. That's what we're hearing.
So wasn't it, we heard something, was it this morning that Ice Time in one of the states had gone up like 15% at a time when, well, they're not in registration period for fall hockey yet, but their ice time was getting more expensive. And I know for some soccer folks, if you cannot put as many teams or as many players on the field as you used to, you now have to rent more field space for a longer period of time to handle the distancing requirements, and that sneaks in and jacks up the price of your field and facility rental. So there's some things that aren't obvious at first glance. I know when I was a field scheduler, I would regularly put 4 teams on a field in Seattle because the field space is all booked out. There's no way in the world of social distancing you can do that. And it's going to be hard for people to find field space in the amount that that they're used to. So one of the last questions had to do with liability. And about a month ago, we had a owner of a club on, and they rented, happened to be a soccer club. They rented fields from a local, I think it's a nonprofit, it's a converted military base. So they took a military base and converted into this huge baseball and soccer complex. But the folks who run that are now requiring a different kind of insurance and higher levels of insurance, more liability protection. And so he was on a hunt for how was he going to now meet this new requirement in his lease for fields. And at the time, he couldn't find it. It didn't exist. Are you all running into changes in your permits for facility use that are now impacting how you deal with liabilities for your sport? Is there a difference between outdoor sports and indoor sports? Or are we still trying to figure this out? Because I know we have a mix here of outdoor sports and indoor sports. Anyone? We may still just be figuring it out. The folks I know in the insurance industry are saying, you know, if you're trying to buy insurance or coverage for illness or COVID, it's sort of like trying to buy typhoon insurance as you're in the middle of the typhoon. So Kenneth, the facilities that they use for volleyball, they're all still closed. So they're not sure what they're going to be required to do when they start back up. Yeah. I think indoor sports have a different kind of problem in that, yeah, I mean, indoors is at this point still considered more risky than outdoors. So I worry about our basketball, our volleyball, our hockey folks, all of whom are indoors.
It's kind of interesting because I think in some ways outdoor things could be, there's more air, right? But there's also air that could flow around. So if somebody sneezes and there's wind, you could get, droplets or whatever. Whereas indoor, a couple things. I mean, like I was telling people last week, is I rented a cabin up in Ely with my family, and they used a biofogger, and this resort used that in all of them. It's just a quick thing that they basically creates a biological fog that kills viruses and bacterias. And they also use a UV sanitization. And you can get those at larger scale where they're part of an HVAC system, I believe, where it could, hit the whole building, and then combine that with, what they're doing with a lot of COVID-19 rooms is they're doing negative pressure. So essentially everything is, there's sucked out of the rooms. I believe that's the way it works. But so the idea, you could possibly, tweak HVAC systems in indoor facilities to really just get rid of everything. Not sports related, but kind of on that topic, I saw an article that the newer Ford SUV police vehicles, Ford's figured out a way to essentially change the circuitry to heat up the vehicle for 15 minutes at 130 degrees, which will kill the coronavirus for the newest police interceptors. So interesting tech using, essentially a vehicle's HVAC system. Maybe that's something that some buildings will be able to do, is have their HVAC systems, heated up so much that it just kills everything. Who do you know?
Oh.
I have a comment.
Yeah, Bob.
I work with the town community ed and community education, and they canceled the summer. So I said, hey, we can do this outdoors. You know, volleyball plays outdoors. I have a lot of portable nets. Why not move my stuff outside? So I haven't heard back from them. So we'll see what happens.
All right. So hopefully summer will give us maybe some different options for basketball and volleyball. And I'm not sure how you get ice to be outside in the summer, but I'm sure the folks in Minnesota will figure some way to enjoy a hockey stick.
Rollerblades.
Yeah,
Rollerblades.
I've got 2 different pairs. I think we invented them here, so I love rollerblading.
Oh, well, what other things are going on? What other questions do you have that you want the group to help you with? It's a really wonderful mix of sports here. And one of the things I really enjoy about this group is being able to hear from different sports and see how maybe that can help you in a way you maybe hadn't thought of. Other questions?
I had one more for Teresa about, fundraising and what's working. We talked a little bit about social media, but what do you think about, using paper mail and actually soliciting, people, organizations, or groups with, physical writing letters to them and sending them paper things? Do you think that's working more or less than social media, or how does that work with some of the things you see?
Well, yeah, people don't get mail as much, as often. And so to, personally send something is nice. I think what we're running into now is, organizations are looking to cut costs. So for example, my organization, we do an annual report every year, and we have a remittance envelope that's included in that annual report for asking for a donation. Well, we eliminated the cost to print the annual report this year, and we converted it online. So we did an email campaign, a PDF of that, and then we did, a soft ask of that. I do know there are organizations that are still doing, some mail or a combination of mail versus online. Another thing that I wanted to touch on briefly too is, if you can get a matching gift, and again, you can promote that by, mail, or you can do it online. I actually had a foundation call me today that told me a month ago, they had kind of eliminated grant making for the time being. And their board had made that decision actually the end of February, before all this COVID stuff really hit, anticipating that something was happening. Well, she called back and said, hey, we've got this matching, micro grant for you. We'd love to be able to offer it to you. What are some ideas for you to get the $5,000 matched? Well, I immediately thought of my virtual event. And I thought, if we can promote that on this virtual event, to our online listeners, we have a $5,000 match tonight. If you donate, and if we raise $5,000, we can get an additional $5,000 to support our mission. So there's so yeah, I wouldn't completely eliminate mail, but I think sometimes it's a cost issue for organizations as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the last question we always ask are what are the issues you want to talk about next week? We've moved from a Friday time slot to a Thursday time slot. I hope that that's not going to be difficult for folks. The other thing we have, just as a peek to next week, sometimes we look at the trends and the questions we're getting. Like I said, Catherine Knorr is going to join us from Hawaii. She's our sports attorney, and she said she wanted to come every other week because she really enjoyed the conversation. She will be here, but there's someone else that in the world of facilities that's going to be with us. Gabe, who's going to be here next Thursday?
Yeah, we're gonna have Jason Jacobs. He's the owner of Adrenaline fitness center in the North Metro part of the Twin Cities here in Minnesota, and it's a large complex, indoor soccer complex. Just kind of pick his brain about what's going on with the complex and what organizational owners are doing that have complexes to get past what's going on now, maybe to what they have to do to make sure their facilities are running under what they have to do with the laws and changes and what they're doing to get their doors open and communicate with people what they're doing. So he'll be on to tell us what's going on with them and to answer some questions.
Right. So if you have facility questions, some want to ask somebody who's got experience with liability and waivers and lawsuits. Catherine used to be a judge. We know we'll have some folks who can help with those conversations next week. So if you've got more questions, we will stick around. If not, I hope it's as sunny and beautiful where you are as it is here in Western Washington. We guard our sun carefully because we don't get nearly as much as we want. Thank you for being with us today. We hope to see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.